this looks to me like a raised Jesus, Lord of the world, directing his church. What say you?
Was this the sort of thing that you would publish in a historical journal as an argument that Jesus was resurrected?
Where was the expectation of a Messiah rising again from the dead? Tell me that.
Because, let me
You
finish.
haven't let me finish my point.
No.
Okay. Please let me finish my point.
No.
Jesus made this claim in the New
Okay,
Testament.
let me finish.
I was
I'm
making a point.
answering your question.
You weren't answering the
You
question.
asked me my question.
Okay.
That was the exciting part when we arm wrestle.
Want more from today's conversation? Register now and you'll receive the ebook of Bart Ehrman debating Peter Williams on the story of Jesus. And tell us who persuaded you in our survey with today's show. Hello and welcome to The Big Conversation from Premier Unbelievable, brought to you in partnership with John Templeton Foundation. I'm your host, Justin Briley. The Big Conversation is all about questions around science, philosophy, history and culture with big thinkers across the belief spectrum. Today we're discussing the central claim of Christian faith. Did Jesus of Nazareth rise from the dead? The rise of Christianity, of course, has shaped the modern world, but are its historical origins best explained by naturalistic means, or is the explanation the first followers gave, that Jesus had risen from the dead, still a plausible option for people today? Well, Bart Ehrman is a well-known New Testament historian whose books include Misquoting Jesus, The Triumph of Christianity, and Heaven and Hell, A History of the Afterlife. Bart is an agnostic. He doesn't believe in the miraculous claims of the Bible, including the resurrection of Jesus, but he's always happy to discuss it with those who do. One of those is Justin Bass, a New Testament scholar who's taught at various institutions, including in Jordan in the Middle East. Now, Justin is a Christian, and in his book, The Bedrock of Christianity, he argues there are a number of bedrock facts concerning the death and resurrection of Jesus agreed upon by the majority of New Testament scholars. And today, he's going to be explaining why he believes the resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth is the best explanation of both Scripture and history. So, Justin and Bart, welcome along to the show.
Thank you.
Blessed to be here.
I hope it won't be too confusing for you, Bart, having two Justins in front of you today.
I am feeling that I'm being ganged up on, but it's okay.
Bearded
I can handle
Justin
it.
and unbearded Justin. You can see the difference.
You guys have met before, haven't you? Do you remember your last outing with each other?
Oh, yes, I do. We had a public debate. And
what was it on?
I don't know. What was it on?
Did the historical Jesus claim to be divine?
Oh, right.
I picked it, so I would remember.
Okay, yes, you would remember.
But it was
I
great.
know which side we took.
Yeah. I didn't convince Bart. I tried my hardest.
You've got a second go. You've got a second chance.
This is round
now.
2.
Here we go.
Exactly.
And hopefully there won't be a round 3. This will be the day of salvation for Bart.
Well, I'm hoping that for you too.
We shall see. I can see this is going to be a fun one. No, but it's a serious topic, you know,
Yes.
and this is an issue that obviously is at the centre, as I said, of the Christian faith. We've heard your story before, Bart, but essentially you didn't once believe these claims, but obviously through a process of time and various experiences decided actually ultimately you believe the Bible is ultimately just a work of human history and not of divine origin. Obviously, Justin, you've come to different conclusions yourself. I think in a sense because you're making the positive case today for the resurrection. We'll start with you, Justin, if that's okay. Can you just give us a thumbnail sketch of how you make the case for the resurrection in your book?
Yes. And thanks again for having me on. Thanks for doing it again with me, Bart. This is really great. As Bart well knows, New Testament scholars today and over the last 250 years of biblical scholarship disagree on tens of thousands of things. But what they agree on, I think, is fascinating. And I think, we should focus on those things. We should, these are important things to look at, and I think it's valuable to know what is it they agree on, what's kind of the common ground. And so my book is basically the goal is to capture where that agreement is among scholars. And to put it simply, on these issues, it's Paul. So Paul being a bedrock eyewitness, that believed he saw the risen Jesus. This has not been denied across the board throughout history. When it comes to his sources, when it comes to Paul's early letters, when it comes to traditions that he is quoting within the letters, Paul, it's agreed upon that he wrote those letters. It's agreed upon that he's getting these traditions from early on, probably when he hung out with Peter for 2 weeks, with James, the Lord's brother. And then we get bedrock facts that I focus on concerning Jesus' death and resurrection that come forth from those bedrock sources. And those are namely these: Jesus' crucifixion. Then we have the claim, the actual just claim of Jesus' resurrection. I think that alone is just an innovative, unparalleled, unique idea that had not been known. Nobody was expecting a resurrected Messiah, let alone a crucified Messiah, in the middle of history. The third is the appearances, which largely are cataloged in 1 Corinthians 15, one of these early traditions. And then the fourth would be, I could use the great title from Bart's book, The Triumph of Christianity. So the fourth is basically how the early Christians, starting in Jerusalem and the very place where Jesus was crucified, launched from there and went on to transform the Roman Empire, went on to transform many nations, lay the foundations of Western civilization, and ultimately, still today, the largest religion on the planet. And all the Pew Research shows throughout the 21st century is going to continue to be. We have a religious future, a religious landscape of the world in our future. So that's kind of some bare facts and sources to lay out.
It's a helpful one. Now, we're not going to cover in depth all of those facts on this conversation, and I thought we might sort of specifically focus in on maybe the last two that you mentioned, particularly the appearances and the rise of Christianity. But let's just briefly touch at least on those others, the fact that Jesus died and the claim of the resurrection. Now, presumably, you don't contest that both of those things happened, Jesus' death on the cross, and indeed that people claimed that a Messiah had been resurrected in history. Do you want to add any?
Well, not much. I mean, no,
then?
it's absolutely. I think, the problem with saying that every historian agrees on something is problematic. You can't really
say virtually all.
Yeah, because of course there are people who deny that Jesus existed, and
Sure.
The weird thing is that there's
I mock them well in the book, and I quote you.
The strange thing is some of the people who think that Jesus didn't exist do think that he was crucified.
Right. Okay.
That's
In
an
the
oddity.
heavens. In the heavens. Yes, you're right.
Yeah. So,
I know who you're talking about.
I think just about every historian who's really worth their weight would, yes, absolutely. I mean, they'd say more things about Jesus, but that they would agree on. But they certainly agree that he was crucified, and they certainly agree that afterward the disciples claimed he was raised from the dead. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Well, we've got a measure of agreement to start with, and
To God be the glory.
I suppose what we want to know is ultimately, how do we put these facts together? And I think that means probably just sketching out a little bit more about, well, why don't we start with the appearances, Justin? So tell us about these appearances. Let's find out where Bart agrees or disagrees with you concerning the nature of them and what was reported, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I think here's a way to think about the appearances. I love Acts 17. I'm sure Bart loves this chapter, and one of my favorite chapters maybe in the entire New Testament, where Paul goes to Athens and he's preaching on the Areopagus. But before that, it actually says that Paul was interacting daily with those who happened to be there in the marketplace and on the streets. And so here Paul's a street preacher, and I just love the idea of him engaging with pagans. And I like to imagine, how did Paul engage with them? What was the content? We're not told the content of those conversations. And so I like to think, in light of the appearances, I think the appearances probably would have been one of the things that he would have presented to a pagan as evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. He probably would have said something like, hey, Jesus appeared to me and I hated him. I believed he was cursed of God on the cross. I believed that, he needed to be, his movement needed to be wiped out. I was on my way to arrest Christians, and ultimately he appeared to me and he loved me and he forgave me and he can forgive you. And then maybe the pagan was kind of like a Bart Ehrman skeptic and said something like, oh, well, why should I believe you, Paul? And Paul said, well, what about Peter? Peter was his chief disciple, and Jesus appeared to him. I can introduce you to him. And what about James, his brother? And what about a group of disciples that ultimately were with Jesus for 3 years? That he appeared to them multiple times. And also 500 people even Jesus appeared to at one time. And hundreds of them, I've met many of them, hundreds of them are still alive. And you can go and investigate and talk to them about what it was like to see Jesus. I mean, I like to just imagine that it was something like that. But, I find that compelling, and I think that, that kind of layout is what Luke means in the beginning of Acts when he refers to the convincing proofs. He says there were these convincing proofs, tekmerios, this great Greek word that was used for irrefutable statements in rhetorical Greek documents. And these convincing proofs were probably the appearances, and I think that really has been
and to that extent,
that's been what's been convincing to Christians throughout the last 2,000 years.
And your contention is that most New Testament historians, be they Christian or not, agree that these claims happened, that people said that they had seen the risen Jesus or met the risen Jesus?
Well, yeah, let me get specific, because I get specific in the
Yeah.
book. So there's actually, by my count, 13 appearances of Jesus, 4 individual appearances to individuals, and 9 to groups, 9 groups. But 4 of those, the 4 individuals, that's the ones probably we'll discuss here. The 4 individuals are the ones that are pretty much bedrock. Virtually all will accept that Jesus appeared to, or Peter believed Jesus appeared to him. James, the brother of Jesus, believed he appeared to him. Paul obviously believed he appeared to him. And then we can bring in Mary Magdalene, because I'm pretty sure Bart, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but believes Mary Magdalene also had that experience. She's accounted for in all 4 Gospels, being the first to actually witness the risen Jesus. So those 4 would be kind of the bedrock eyewitnesses.
Well, why don't we stick with those specific ones and get your take on that? But so, to what degree do you agree that at least people claimed to have seen the risen Jesus?
I think it's probably right. I mean, Paul certainly. Paul tells us that he did. The problem with these others, of course, is they don't tell us that. So we don't have, Peter didn't leave us writings where he said, I saw Jesus. James didn't leave us writings. We don't know who the 500 were, none of this. So what historians tend to do, of course, is to examine their sources of information. And the most important thing is to know what the sources are, to determine whether they are reliable or not, and to see what they say. I mean, so we infer that, I think that Peter probably did say that he saw Jesus, and I think James probably did. I don't know about the 500. They come out of nowhere in 1 Corinthians 15. There's
and Mary Magdalene?
Well, we don't have anything from her either, obviously.
I know, but do you believe that she had an experience?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
And I believe that in a lot of religious traditions, you get reports like that. And so my issue with this kind of bedrock thing is whether it's appropriate to consider these kinds of claims outside of other claims for other religious figures. Do we treat them equally, or do we provide a kind of do we say, well, it's more likely true because it's in the Bible, and less likely true if it's in the Mormon tradition, or if it's in the Muslim tradition, or if it's in ancient Greek and Roman mythology, or not just mythology, ancient Greek and Roman history. And so do you give equal weight to everything? And if so, then why is it that you prefer these witnesses to the others?
Yeah,
Justin.
Great question. What is the evidence? So my question would be, what is the evidence? You brought up Islam, you brought up Mormonism. Well, in Islam, this only supernatural really claim is to Muhammad. It's one eyewitness. And I agree with Deuteronomy. We shouldn't trust anything unless it's at least 2 or 3 witnesses. So we have 4 that you agree with. In Christianity, when it comes to Mormonism, again, Joseph Smith is the only person to say that Moroni appeared to him, and he says Jesus and God the Father and a lot of other strange things.
I'm not sure, Justin.
But only one person, only one eyewitness in both those cases, both those religions you brought up. But
Right.
I'd like to hear the evidence
Well,
for the Greek and Roman.
I don't know if you've studied Mormonism very much.
Oh, I've studied a lot.
There are 11 eyewitnesses, and they
To the golden plates.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're
Yes.
going to compare
And that
golden plates to the resurrection of Jesus?
No, I'm just saying if you're a historian,
Yeah.
and what you're doing is you're saying we're going to trust eyewitnesses.
Okay, I'm fine with them seeing golden plates, but what does that tell
4
us?
of them say they saw Moroni give them to him. 4 saw him.
Half
Who
of
actually
them-
signed affidavits.
Half of them left the faith.
They left. No, they didn't. They
abandoned
left.
Joseph
They
Smith.
left Joseph Smith.
Well, they abandoned Joseph Smith, yeah.
But when they abandoned Joseph Smith, they continued to say that they saw Moroni. So, do you credit those?
Okay, well that would only be 3. But
No,
to
but
abandon Joseph Smith, Joseph Smith
5.
is the foundational
It's-
prophet.
It's 4 plus Joseph Smith. That's 5. I'm just saying, are you being impartial, or are you saying it's more likely because these are biblical witnesses?
Well, okay.
In those
Let me
cases, by
grant-
the way, we actually have their testimony.
Okay.
And it's within 100 years.
Yeah, but it's
So
good enough.
with the New Testament, you don't have Peter's testimony or James's testimony or the 500. So you don't have 4. You've got Paul.
But what we have is good enough to convince you. For the New Testament eyewitnesses, you've already agreed that
this is
you
exactly
believe
my point.
Jesus appeared to them.
Exactly my point.
With Moroni,
I agree they claimed it.
but let's stick with
But
Moroni.
that isn't proof that it happened.
Right.
Who
And
else
that's the
has
difference.
Moroni appeared to other than those people in history?
We're talking about a particular event. Was Jesus raised from the dead and a particular
But other things can support another event, right? So if Jesus is appearing to people, for example, all throughout history, if we have eyewitness,
that's a separate argument.
Okay.
So I think we have to take one argument at a time, because
Okay.
if you just start piling on arguments, we have to consider each of those arguments in turn.
Okay, but I'm just giving you my reasoning that
I
why
understand.
Moroni's not convincing.
I understand,
All right.
but I don't think you've listened to my case here.
Okay.
You are basing everything you said.
Not basing everything.
You said the
We're
bedrock.
starting with appearances. This isn't my only argument.
You said the bedrock is Paul, because Paul gives us the information about Cephas and James. Correct?
I said Paul is the bedrock in the sense that the vast majority of scholars agree when it comes to Paul. That's what I mean by
how
bedrock.
many ancient Christian writings do we have by somebody who says in those writings that he saw Jesus?
Directly, Paul.
Thank you.
But
How
we
many
have,
do we have?
we have Peter.
for-
I would say Peter wrote first and second Peter. And second Peter, Peter says that he saw
saw the transfiguration.
the transfiguration. Exactly.
That's not the resurrection.
Okay.
So you've
but
got
John
Paul.
saw the risen Jesus, at least in heaven, in Revelation.
Are you're counting that as a historical source?
Of seeing something, of seeing Jesus again. That's
In
enough.
heaven.
That would contribute to the argument. Again, that's the point. That these things go back to
Let me try again.
support
because
the
I think
original
I want us to be clear what we're
miraculous
talking
claim.
about.
You have nothing beyond
be
those
clear.
3 witnesses with Moroni.
Okay.
Nothing.
Let me finish.
Okay.
You're saying that Paul gives us the evidence for himself. He saw Jesus, but none of the others. You think Peter wrote 1st and 2nd Peter, and okay, but that would be 2.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that in the case of Moroni giving Joseph Smith the plates, we have 4. So if the idea is that you trust eyewitnesses who swear to what they saw, and that we're doing this impartially.
No. Okay.
We're doing this impartially as historians. In other words, we're not trying to back up our faith. We're not trying to prove that we're right about something. Historians don't do that. Historians try to figure out what happened in the past, and they evaluate their sources. So what I'm saying is, if you're going to take the sources that agree with you and you say that they're probably right, not because they agree with you, but because they're reliable sources, because you've got Paul and you've got Peter, say, okay, well, I've got 4 people from Moroni giving the plates. And these people are highly religious people. The religiosity was never questioned. I am not saying that I think that it happened. I don't think it happened.
Yeah. For good reason.
But on the way you're mounting an argument for Paul and Peter, I don't see how you can exclude the argument for Moroni.
Well, let's hear from Justin. So essentially, Justin, is the question here, is there better evidence that the resurrection claims of these first followers of Jesus are better evidence than other claims from other religious traditions like Mormonism and so on, where they also claim to have been eyewitnesses to something miraculous?
Exactly. And what I was saying with the when it comes to the 4 eyewitnesses, one of them is Joseph Smith.
No. There's 4 in addition to Joseph Smith who claim they saw him. So there's 5.
Okay.
Well, regardless, but I guess I want to hear why if you
it's
do
multiple-
regard them as different in some way to the
because
Mormons.
they're claiming a supernatural being named Moroni appeared to them. Okay. And so who else then has this Moroni figure appeared to? Because there's been other people that have claimed supernatural things have happened. But see, one of the things that I would say, well, who else has they appeared to, right?
Okay.
And who else has Moroni appeared to?
Well,
Other than those 4.
Now, I just want you to agree that's a separate argument now.
Yeah, but
You
it
want supporting
contributes.
So let me.
I build a
ju-
case with
Yeah,
multiple
exactly, I
arguments.
get it.
It's not just one.
So when it comes to corroborative evidence of later witnesses, what about the angel? What about the Mother Mary? Now, Mary appears regularly to people. It's completely well documented. Thousands of people claim this happens. I'm going to assume that since you're not Catholic, you don't think these appearances happened.
I'm open to the evidence, and I do think some of the stories
Okay, so what
of
do you think
Mary
of
is
the evidence?
compelling. I think some of the stories is compelling.
You think she does appear to people?
But I think what the issue
No. Do you think she appears to people?
No, I don't. I don't know.
You just said the evidence was compelling.
Well, I said it's it's something to look into. I'm saying it's enough to look into.
Why don't you look into it? This would be
Well,
very important.
I have looked into it.
Okay, so
but let me answer. I think it lacks the unexpectedness. So it makes and it normally happens in Catholic contexts.
no, this is completely wrong. It
No,
does
no, no.
not.
Well,
does not-
let me finish.
let's let Justin finish his point.
It
and I'll
normally
let you
happens
come
in
back.
Catholic contexts. Okay.
Okay.
And so people who are already Catholic,
Yes.
who expect, they pray to Mary regularly, They expect saints they pray to saints. They expect this kind of thing. And it's happened in only, a handful of type of situations that have actually been confirmed by the church. But I ask you, if Mary is actually appearing to people, would that support the resurrection or not support the resurrection?
No, I'm saying that you have better...
No, answer that question.
I will answer it by telling you that we have better evidence for Mary appearing to people, many groups of people in the modern period, than we have for Jesus appearing to people in the modern period.
Okay.
By your criteria, that would mean that it's more likely that Mary is showing up. By your criteria. By my criteria, neither one happens.
Okay, but if Mary is appearing to people, does it more support the resurrection or not?
Yes, if Mary is showing up to people, then that would support the resurrection.
So your example to parallel, to kind of thwart the evidence for the resurrection, actually would support the resurrection.
No, you're not understanding my argument. I'm saying that
But that's true, right? What I just said is true.
No, you're not understanding.
You just admitted that. You said if Mary is appearing to people, and you think there's a lot of evidence for it. I don't think so. I think it lacks the unexpectedness. The apostles, these people like Paul, Peter, Mary, were in no way expecting Jesus to appear to them. In no way.
Right.
So Catholics who expect, that can have an expectation for this type of thing, it makes sense why it would happen. So you have so the arguments.
The problem is you're arguing about three or four things at once. You're arguing 3 or 4 things at once. I don't think you've read the literature on Mary, because in many
I've read a lot of it. Yeah, Laurentine. Yeah.
Then you know full well that many times it's not expected. So, because if you've read the literature,
no, of course it's expected. That's the point.
No, then you haven't read the literature.
Well,
there are many testimonies of people who don't expect it and can't believe it.
Yeah, but they know about Christianity. They know about people appearing to people. They know about the resurrection of Jesus.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
And is that different from Jesus
in the
showing
Christian
up to people?
worldview? Yeah. Where was the expectation for Jesus appearing to people?
This is a key part of what you
mean
discussed,
by people who knew him?
Yeah. What was the expectation?
But where's the expectation for Mary? They're not expecting her to show up, and she does.
But they're in a worldview that allows that.
They are too in a worldview.
No,
they're in an apocalyptic worldview that expects
where was
the
a Messiah? Where was the expectation of a Messiah rising again from the dead? Tell me that.
That isn't what generated the appearances. They thought they saw Jesus afterwards.
Of course, because he actually appeared to them.
Then they concluded he was the Messiah.
But if he didn't appear to them like you believe,
they weren't expecting the Messiah to rise.
How did they expect? Well, then how did they?
And they weren't expecting Mary to appear.
Okay, then how did they believe Jesus appeared to them?
They saw him.
Okay. So what did they see?
Well, how do we know? What do they see when they see Mary? You don't think they see Mary.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think some of the evidence for the Mary is they saw something.
Well, I think they saw something with Jesus too, of course. Yeah. I've never argued against that.
But that's the thing. It led them to say something that was completely unexpected.
Yes.
So I think it's compelling evidence.
Can I just because you guys are going 10 to the dozen here, and I just want to, for the sake of the viewer or listener, I just want to be really clear on this point that you're making at this point, Justin, because there's a lot of different points being thrown out here. But it's that you say that the idea of a resurrected Messiah who had been crucified and resurrected was completely unexpected in that Jewish culture, and therefore is what you're essentially saying. It's unlikely they would have made something like that up. Yeah. There had to be some kind of experience that came behind that claim because it was such an unexpected claim. Whereas I think what I understand you saying, appearances of the Virgin Mary, although they may not have been expected in that moment or whatever by the people who are experiencing them, there is a general expectation in Catholicism that sort of thing happens, and therefore it's not so hard to believe that it's been generated.
So where did they get the idea?
I'd like to respond to that.
I just wanted to make sure we got that really clear.
No, I think it's a good clarification because I think that's absolutely right.
Okay.
And I think it's what happened with the followers of Jesus as well.
Okay, go on.
They did not expect a Messiah to be raised from the dead. There was no expectation that a Messiah was going to die and raise from the dead. So they didn't expect that. The question is, what happened to generate that belief? Mm-hmm. My view is it's absolutely right that Peter probably, Mary probably, Paul certainly, I would say, thought they saw Jesus alive afterwards. Something happened to them to make them think that Jesus was alive. It's not because they were expecting the Messiah to rise from the dead.
No, it wasn't.
Right.
What we don't know is who else had these experiences. What we know is that there were claims that other people did after the first people claimed it.
Okay.
And so once you have a follower of Jesus like Peter say, I saw the Lord, It's not implausible. In fact, others start saying, "Oh, I saw him too."
So a bit
that's
of a
not
copycat
So
sort
it's
of
the
scenario.
same thing with Mary. It's exactly the same thing. And so my point is not that proves that Mary was raised from the dead or anything. My point is that if that's the kind of argument you want to make about Jesus, you can make it about other people that is just as as plausible.
Is the historical issue here then that you think that this claim that the Messiah had been raised was kind of a post facto kind of sort of rationalization of these experiences they had?
They thought he was the Messiah before he died, in my judgment.
Right. So they did think he was the Messiah. And
they weren't expecting him to die.
Right.
He died. One of them, two of them, three of them said, "I've seen the Lord." And then they had to figure out, well, how does that work? And it must mean, if he's alive again, it must mean that God's raised him from the dead.
But there were other...
These are apocalyptic Jews. Apocalyptic Jews, the only way they can imagine life after death is an embodied existence. They don't believe the soul lives on after death. These are Jews. Jews believe that the body and soul are one thing, and that afterlife, if there is an afterlife, it's body and soul. That if they see Jesus alive afterwards, it must mean that his soul has come back into his body. How does that happen? It can only happen when God does it.
Okay.
God has raised him from the dead. Once they say they raised him from the dead and they already knew he was the Messiah, that's when they start saying the Messiah was raised.
Quick response and we'll go to a break and then we'll carry on.
I was just going to say, but there's other categories that they could have, as Jews, thought of. The Maccabees died horrible deaths, and they believed they lived on, exalted in the heaven. And they, you have many other examples of this kind of disembodied continuing to live on, but they will rise again at the final resurrection. But what the early Christians said is that Jesus had risen again now. The resurrection had already begun. Bart agrees with that. But where did that idea come from? That's the unexpectedness.
Yeah, it came from
it's
apocalyptic
completely unexpected.
Judaism.
Right. But you're saying they put it together. You're saying they're the geniuses who put this innovative, unparalleled idea that has changed the world. That all goes back to the brain of Mary Magdalene?
I'm changing the world has nothing to do with it. The issue is, what does an apocalyptic Jew...
It did change the world, though, right?
What does an apocalyptic Jew think if they see somebody who had died, who's alive now? Now, when you see your grandmother in your bedroom 2 weeks after she died, typically today, this happens a lot, 1 out of 8 people in our country have a vision of a deceased loved one and are convinced they're alive again or that they're alive. In our context, we believe that the body and the soul are separable, and the soul lives on afterwards. So when you see your grandmother in your bedroom, as 1 out of 8 people, not necessarily your grandmother, but some beloved one, typically what you think is their soul's gone to heaven, they've come down to visit me, because that's our mentality of an afterlife.
But
apocalypticists don't have that. They don't have that view. Their view is that if somebody's alive after they died, it has to be a resurrection because the soul doesn't exist outside the body. So when they see Jesus, he's got to have a soul back in the body, which means God has raised him from the dead. That's the first thing they know, and they don't have any theology about it. It's just, oh my God, he's come back from the dead, and then they work it out.
Quick response, and we'll go to our break.
No, Josephus, for example, definitely believes souls exist.
He's not an apocalyptic Jew.
Well, why
he's
not?
He's anti-apocalyptic. I don't know if you've studied Josephus. Josephus is famously anti-apocalyptic. We're talking about apocalyptic Jews.
Bart assumes that they just saw something, but he hasn't explained to us what they saw. And whatever they saw changed their complete worldview.
I don't know what you see when you see your grandmother either.
Okay, but I definitely don't say she's raised from the dead.
You say she's still alive.
Well, but she's still dead, though, right?
In Jesus' case, my point is...
In our case, if you're going to use that parallel, in our case, when we see someone in the afterlife, yes, we think they're still alive in heaven, but we say they're dead here on earth.
We say their body is dead.
That's not what the early Christians said.
That's right.
They said Jesus had risen from the dead.
Right. So you need to
listen. A crucified man had risen from the dead.
Yes, you need to listen to why that is. We say their body is dead and their soul is alive because we believe in the difference between the body and the soul. Apocalyptic Jews did not. They could not say that his soul is still living because his body can't be alive unless his soul comes back into it. They don't have our view of the separation of body.
I disagree with you.
Well, look, we're going to take a break there.
Really?
We're going to take a break.
Okay, tell me some.
I'm going to take a break here, and we are going to just take a quick break. and we'll come back to this. We can keep going on the
I think we will.
appearances, or we can. It might naturally segue into the next bedrock fact that Justin has, which is this rise of Christianity itself, which you think was unique. This claim being made, unlike other Jewish revolutionary movements, the Jesus movement was different to those. So we'll talk about that. We're talking here for the big conversation about the central claim of Christianity, that Jesus rose from the dead. My two guests are Bart Ehrman and Justin Bass. We'll be back in just a moment. Enjoying the conversation? Tell us who persuaded you in our survey. Plus, register now and you'll receive the ebook of Bart Ehrman debating Peter Williams on the story of Jesus. Welcome back to The Big Conversation. We're talking with Bart Ehrman and Justin Bass today, asking the central question, did Jesus of Nazareth rise from the dead? Now, just in that last section, Bart, you were sort of obviously going at it with Justin there as to whether this constitutes evidence for a resurrection or whether it's just a sort of post hoc rationalization by apocalyptic Jews of the fact that they had some kind of an experience. Now, what do you say those experiences were? They said it was of a physically resurrected Messiah. What do you say they probably actually experienced from your perspective?
So we have lots of records, of course, of people being seen after they're dead. It happens, as I was saying earlier, it just today it happens for 1 out of 8 people. They see something and they think it's that person, or they hear, or they touch, they can feel them, and all sorts of experiences like that. And throughout history, there have been all these thousands of appearances of Mother Mary, and we have eyewitnesses to Romulus being raised from the dead. People saw him after he died. Apollonius of Tyana. We have all. So in every instance, you do have to ask. Of course, the historian wants to know what really happened. And in most cases, all you can do is come up with options. There's no way of knowing what they saw, partly because they don't tell us. In this case, we only have one person who actually said he saw Jesus, and that's Paul, but he doesn't actually say what he saw. He says that God revealed his son to me, and he says, I saw Jesus, but he doesn't give us any details, so we don't know. But it's quite easy to come up with a list of things that have led to that kind of claim over the centuries and still led today. Some people have a dream; they think that that they were awake when they saw it. Some people have hallucinations. Some people see somebody who looks similar and they mistake him. Somebody sees something at a distance. I mean, there are. So what happened in the case of Peter or Paul? We can't say. Just as we can't say for any of the others. And so that's my point.
You don't think they were just inventing it? They had so. Some kind of an experience.
Some people think so.
But not the one that they claimed to have.
I really don't think Paul was making things up. I just don't. Right. I don't think he was lying about it. He really saw it. He saw Jesus. Yeah.
And I'll just add, Bart says this is happening all the time. Where does someone project an enemy apparition? What example do you have?
It happens sometimes. If you feel guilty, for example, if you feel guilty about what you've done to somebody leading to...
Give me an example.
Well, if you read the psychological literature on visions, you actually find a good bit of it.
Anything specific?
Well, they aren't names that you would. They're just people. I mean, they're just people.
Pretty sure. Not in the literature. Not in the literature. No.
Okay. Well, I suggest you read it.
There is no projection of enemies in the literature. Dale Allison would.
Yeah. So what I'd say is that some people have hypothesized that Paul felt very guilty, or that Peter felt very guilty about his denial of Jesus, and that he started out, and so because of his guilt, he saw something. It's very common. One of the most common reasons for seeing a bereaved loved one is because you felt like you mistreated them before they died, and the guilt creates and so.
But again, that doesn't guarantee saying an unparalleled claim of resurrection of a Messiah that was crucified. He could have felt like he forgave him, but it doesn't mean he would have said that.
And not only that, but I've never said it did. And so that isn't my claim.
You said that what's caused Peter's claim.
Peter did not...
He didn't claim Jesus rose from the dead?
Okay. What I've been saying is Peter did not claim that the Messiah got raised from the dead the second he saw Jesus. What he thought was Jesus had come back to life.
You're saying he figured it out as an apocalyptic Jew. I'm going with your argument, yeah. But Paul, how does Paul imagine
I was getting to that.
Crucified man
I was getting to that.
Rising from the dead that he hates, that he thinks cursed by God, appearing to him? I'm looking forward to that one.
Okay, go ahead, Bart.
So Paul did not get this information from Peter and James. Paul was persecuting Christians before he ever met Peter and James. So he knows the Christian claims already. There have been a lot of psychological analyses about what might have happened to somebody who feels guilt over what they're doing to these people that would generate a vision and to have a conversion. As you probably know, there are instances in which people who are enemies of Christ have visions in which they get converted. And so Paul would be in that category.
Yeah.
Okay.
But again, Sundar Singh, by the way, would be a great example of this. This was an Indian that became a great missionary. He was burning Bibles. He was persecuting Christians in the early 1900s. And ultimately, he had a vision of Jesus, and he was transformed like Paul. But again, that happened after the Christian claim has already been made.
Yes, so did Paul.
For Paul.
So did Paul.
Yeah.
That's my point. It's exactly the same. So you can't say that it doesn't happen to enemies.
So you think he
because you
understood
just gave the example of an enemy where it happened.
So you think he understood the Christian claim clearly as he was persecuted?
He understood that they were saying Jesus got raised from the dead. Absolutely.
Okay. And then
Why else is he persecuted?
And then he imagined on the Damascus Road.
I didn't say he imagined anything on the Damascus Road.
Well, what happened on the Damascus Road?
I just said that there are lots of options and we don't know because he doesn't tell us.
Okay. Well, he said he saw the Lord Jesus. That's what he said.
He said he saw the Lord Jesus. But what did where did he see him? When did he see him? How did he see him? How close was him? Did they talk? Did they spend a week together?
Seeing him's good enough, right?
He thought he saw Jesus. I've been saying that all along. He thought he saw Jesus.
I'm not expecting.
I'm asking why you don't believe him. Why do you think Paul's wrong?
Why don't I think a person got raised from the dead?
Yes.
Oh.
Why don't you think Jesus got raised from the dead?
I don't think anybody gets raised from the dead.
Okay.
Because it violates the laws of nature.
Okay.
I mean,
so you have the kind of a materialist, fundamentalist view.
Well, let me ask this. You think God raised Jesus from the dead, right? Do you think God can break the laws of mathematics? Can God
can't contradict himself, no. Because he is.
Exactly.
Mathematics is his language.
That's right. The other language he uses is physics. Can he break the laws of physics?
I mean, I think we're getting off.
No, we are not getting off. This is precisely, you asked me why I don't believe it. And the reason I don't believe it is because it violates the laws of physics. And I don't think
he can feed things into his system, for sure.
I don't think God can break the law of physics any more than he can break the law of mathematics.
Feeding things into his system to bring a dead person to life is not the same thing as making 2 + 2 5. That's completely different things.
They are both laws that have never been broken in history.
Except in the case of Jesus, right?
So here's the question. This is it's a very big question, because what you're arguing is that the most probable event that happens with Jesus, because Paul and Peter said it happened, the most probable thing is the violation of a law of physics that has never been violated in 13.8 billion years. Never. Except in this one instance. Now, if you're a historian, historians don't argue that something that happened only once in all of history is the most probable occurrence because somebody said it happened.
Unless there's an incredible evidence to
The incredible
demonstrate.
evidence is that Paul said
Not just that. Not just that. We're just getting started.
What's interesting here for me, Bart, though, is that presumably, on the face of it, if you do believe that God would never, if there is a God, let's say, that God would never break the laws of physics, then on the faces of it, no amount of evidence could persuade you of a miraculous claim. You've kind of decided that before you come to the text.
What you'd have to do is you'd have to have evidence from physicists that these laws don't apply.
Okay, so you'd have to go to the physicist rather than the
historian. You certainly could prove it, because physicists...
So we need to go to the physicists for the evidence.
Well, if you're going to say that the laws of physics have been broken one time in the history of the human race, then you need pretty good evidence. And the evidence that somebody said they saw somebody...
But that's not the only evidence, and we're going to talk about more. But that's not the only evidence. We were talking about the appearances, and the appearances, I think, and you've said this, and I've appreciated you said this in how Jesus became God. You talk about how basically the evidence is consistent with if Jesus did rise from the dead. And I appreciate that, because you're saying if Jesus rose from the dead, basically the evidence we have looks the same. It would look the same. So you don't believe he rose from the dead, but the evidence does support the miracle. Do you agree with that?
No, of course I don't.
Well, okay, consistent with the miracle. Is it consistent with the miracle?
Let me put it this way. There is a famous Jewish holy man, Baal Shem Tov, who eyewitnesses have told us, lived in the 18th century, he told us he could heal the sick, he could cast out demons, he could raise the dead. We have eyewitness accounts of this. And my suspicion is that you don't think it really happened, because you'd be suspicious of those reports.
I think the fact that nobody outside of Hasidic Jews think it happened is quite
okay. Who outside of Christians think that Jesus was raised from the dead?
Pinchas Lapid He was a Jewish historian and scholar. He wrote a book called The Resurrection of Jesus. You should read it. It's actually really good. He actually was convinced by the evidence that Jesus rose from the dead.
Right. Okay.
You should read it. It's really
I mean,
good.
I
He's a great
guess
scholar. He
the
was a great
point is,
scholar.
if you come to believe that Jesus has been raised from the dead physically, it's quite likely you will become a Christian. So
and if you
inevitably
believe the miracles of Baal Shem Tov, then you become a Hasidic Jew.
And I also point out
So that is an evidence
Okay.
that Baal Shem Tov really did these things because somebody believes and then converts. It's not evidence.
and I would also add that there are scholars that I appreciate, people like E.P. Sanders. I know you respect E.P. Sanders. Like in Jesus and Judaism, the way he ends is basically saying, I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
But he admits the evidence is pretty strong.
There's
people that admit the evidence is strong, but they still
I guess
don't go all the way.
I guess my question
I
is,
think the evidence though is strong. I don't think that's
if you
that should be
well, you
debated.
haven't cited any all you've cited so far are eyewitnesses.
I mean,
And you've agreed that
Eyewitnesses-
eyewitnesses in other cases don't work for you,
And just-
including Baal Shem Tov. And so I'd like to know, why do you choose some eyewitnesses over others?
Again, nobody. This goes back to Moroni. Nobody outside of those few people believed Moroni appeared to them. Nobody outside of certain Hasidic Jews believed that Baal Shem Tov did
Okay,
miracles.
how about Mormons?
How about Christians?
How about Mormons?
I just said nobody believes those miraculous claims happen outside.
Yes. Well, nobody outside of the Christian faith thinks that Jesus is the Son of God who was raised from the dead.
No. But people like Paul, for example, is an enemy that got convinced that Jesus rose from the dead.
You
Who
just
is the Paul for Baal Shem Tov? Tell me who he is.
Well, there are a lot of Hasidic Jews who didn't start out as Hasidic Jews who read these stories and become
who's a
convinced.
Paul? Who's someone who was persecuting the Hasidic Jews and then got convinced by the Baal Shem Tov miracles? You bring all these people up, but it's insane. I mean, Jesus is completely unparalleled, completely different than all these
You
rest.
are a Christian. You've always been a Christian. Of course you think that Jesus is the greatest thing ever. And so I
You've almost
understand
said that you think Jesus is the most compassionate, the most influential, amazing person. You've
No,
said
I don't think
things
he's the
close
most
to that.
compassionate. No, I don't. But so you're in the Christian tradition and you want to show that you're right. And, so, okay.
I want to just demonstrate that Jesus
but
is
you're
Lord
not doing
because
this
he
as a historian.
died for our sins, and I want people to know that.
Exactly. You're a theologian, and that's fine. I have no qualms with you as a theologian. What I have qualms with is you claiming that you're doing this on disinterested
It's
historical
a historical
ground.
religion. If it didn't happen in history, it didn't
But
happen.
if you're going to be a historian, you have to treat every religion equally,
And if you're
not
gonna be
giving
a-
superiority to your particular faith.
But if you're going to
that
be a
you were
historian,
raised in.
you need to be open-minded to miracles.
Yes, you're open-minded to everything.
No,
I am open-minded. Yes. If you can
said
show,
that you said that the physics can't be.
I did say that.
defied.
No, you didn't hear me.
Okay.
I said you're saying it happened once in the entire human race. How many people have lived? I don't know how many people have lived on billions of people. There are 8 billion people alive today. None of them is going to rise from the dead. How many people have risen from the dead? In your judgment, 1 out of 20 billion who've lived or something. How many people have mistaken something they've seen? How many people have had a dream that they thought was something that was real? How many people have had a vision of a deceased loved one afterwards? Millions.
Right.
I
So
mean, this is
if you're
basically
not gonna
Hume's argument, isn't it? Against miracles. That
and I'll just
essentially
make
it's
one
far.
So I'm different
far
from
more
Hume.
like-
I'm not saying that it didn't happen. I'm saying that if you're
So you're saying a historian can discover miracles in history? Then you are saying that.
I wish you wouldn't put words in my lips.
Okay. Because I said you
I
seem to be
said,
closed-minded.
let
as
me
a historian
repeat
on
it
miracles.
because I don't think you heard it.
Okay.
Heard it. I'm saying that historians establish what probably happened on the past on the basis of probabilities. If the probability is 1 out of 800 billion or something versus 1 out of 8,
Well,
what do historians think about that?
Some-
Do they think it's more likely that the laws of physics are broken? Even they grant, okay, laws of physics could be, suppose they grant that. Do they say it did happen in this one instance because we have these 3 people who said it happened? Or do they say maybe they missaw something?
Okay, Justin, and then we'll move on to your next bedrock fact.
we talked about 107 billion people that have walked the planet. That's fine. Out of those 107 billion people, how many of those people, those human beings, are worshipped by billions of people and called Lord and God today?
I don't know what the number is.
One.
So
One.
So 107 billion. So how many?
No, 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 but-
How many of those have been?
Let me
believers
finish
in
my.
No, no,
Please
no,
let me
no,
finish
no,
my
no,
point.
no, no,
This is my turn. This is my turn.
Okay.
I thought
I'll let you respond.
Jesus is the only
You
person.
asked me a question.
Okay.
You asked me a question. You wanted to know how many, and I was trying to answer your question.
well,
So may I answer
Tell
your
me
question?
someone else other than
Okay.
Jesus that's worshipped by billions.
I'm answering by asking you.
Oh, no, see, that's not, you weren't answering the question.
Okay, I will answer the question.
So let me at least
Of those
finish my point.
107 billion, you can't say that more people worship Jesus now, therefore he was raised from the dead.
Okay.
Because, let me
You haven't
finish.
let me finish my point. I was
I'm
making a point.
answering your question.
You weren't answering
You asked
the
me my
question.
question,
Okay.
and
I'll
I'm
let you
answering it
fin-
now.
all right,
Let me
let Bart
finish my
finish,
question.
and then you come back.
You say 107 billion, and since more people worship Jesus now, that's evidence.
No, that's not what I
okay,
said.
then I
So let me
misunderstood.
finish.
Okay.
You asked
So,
how-
so I'm saying what we have here is an extraordinary, by exactly what these exact odds that you're talking about, we have an extraordinary anomaly. We have one human being who walked this earth from the last, billions of years, and however long humans have been on the earth. Out of 107 billion, this one human being is worshipped by billions and called Lord and God. I'm saying that is an extraordinary anomaly, and so I'm saying that's something that historians would go, "Wow, that kind of is amazing." If Jesus achieved that extraordinary anomaly, 1 out of 107 billion on that point, maybe he achieved another extraordinary anomaly. Maybe he rose from the dead.
Okay.
Are you really
Bart.
using that as a historical argument?
I'm using it as an argument for the resurrection, whatever you want to call it.
What kind of
You- you
argument
don't-
would
you-
you call it?
Well, what's your problem with the argument?
But isn't it an
That-
extraordinary anomaly that Jesus is worshipped by billions? How is a crucified
No,
man...
it's not an anomaly at all. I wrote an entire book explaining how it happened.
Okay, how does a crucified
Without a-
man in
without a
his
single
mid-30s, how is he worshipped by billions of people today? I mean, you don't think that's not an extraordinary anomaly?
It's not an anomaly. It's
By
amazing.
definition, in mathematics, 1 out of 107 billion. But I'll let you finish.
Why is that proof that he was raised from the dead? It's proof that people are convinced he was raised from the dead.
I said it's a good argument against this idea that you were making that, oh, you're telling me only one person out of all the 107 billion rose from the dead? A historian can't say that. That's not good enough evidence. Well, here's another point on that same person that is an extraordinary
But you can't
anomaly.
explain that one. You can explain why there are so many billions of Christians in the world. It's not hard to explain without a miraculous explanation. So why? I don't understand why you're arguing this.
But this single individual has had this kind of impact.
Yes, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing.
So it's normal for crucified men in the ancient
course it's
world
not
that are
normal.
Jews
It's
to be worshipped by
completely
billions
anomalous.
and
But
lay
that
the
doesn't-
foundations of
but that
Western
doesn't mean that he
civilization.
was
This is
raised-
normal.
You are not listening to me.
Okay.
The resurrection of Jesus would be a miracle of God. You can't use the fact that many people became convinced of that miracle to prove that the miracle happened. Okay. You can only use that to show that people were convinced it happened. There are other reasons people get convinced by things other than the fact that God intervened in history.
Okay, but don't you see the point that if Jesus did rise from the dead, that would be a pretty good answer to why he has had this extraordinary anomaly impact on the
No,
world?
I don't think it has any relevance to it.
No relevance.
No relevance.
Okay,
I mean,
that's fine.
Okay, let me put it like this, okay?
Okay.
So, the Mormon Church, back to the Mormons for a second. The early Christian movement, from the days of Paul up to when Constantine converted, okay, it grew, if you actually just crunch the numbers, like you start out, just say in Paul's day, I would say before, say right after the resurrection, there are like 20 people, okay, who believe in you. You got the 11 disciples, you got a handful, say there's 20 people.
20 to 3 billion, yeah.
So by the time you get to Constantine, by the time he converts, there's probably 5 or 6 million Christians in the world. So if you crunch the growth rate, what would it take to get from 20 to 5 or 6 million at that time? It's about 30% every decade. Okay, and so the question is, does that require a miracle or not, or can you explain it by natural grounds? And the Mormon Church has grown that rate since it was founded by Joseph Smith. Now, I wouldn't want to say that Mormonism is necessarily true because it grew at that rate, or that the angel Moroni necessarily revealed the golden, because it grew at that rate. If Christianity had continued to grow at that rate after Constantine, by the end of the 4th century, there would have been more Christians than humans in the world. So the rate of growth, or the number of people who come to believe in something, is not an indication of the miraculous beginnings of the faith.
But I didn't say that. I'm asking you, you did not give me an extraordinary anomaly for Mormonism. I gave you an extraordinary anomaly for Jesus of Nazareth.
The extraordinary anomaly is that the angel Moroni showed Joseph Smith these plates.
No, but
That's never happened before.
But no
Out
one
of
is
107 billion people in the world, that has never happened to anybody.
We're back to the same point. Nobody outside of those people believe that.
Either do the
Moroni
billions
has
of
not
people who
appeared
believe in
to anyone
Jesus.
else.
The people who believe in Jesus' resurrection are Christians.
Well, no. Skeptics and unbelievers all around the world have been convinced by the
They've
resurrection
converted,
of Jesus.
and they've been converted to Mormonism.
Oh, well, in Utah, yeah.
No, you're not hearing me again.
I know.
30%
But
growth rate.
they're working off, on that point, they're working off Christian capital. I mean, it's a cult of Christianity. So
Well,
they're working
you could
off
argue
Christian
that Christianity is working off of Jewish capital.
I mean, can
capital.
we?
But Judaism didn't spread.
I know we've kind of wandered into this final bedrock fact, and I just want you to establish it, though, just for the listening and watching audience, Justin. Just talk about this, why you believe that the rise of Christianity, or as you could put it, the rise of the Nazarenes, constitutes not just, a fact of history, but something that points towards the truth of the resurrection.
Well, I think, one point that I wanted to make that centers around that is, again, Jesus. I mean, again, we're dealing with a person, not just anybody that rose from the dead, but the most influential, the most sung about, the most painted, the most written about, great moral teacher, the most compassionate, the most extraordinary figure, who's ever lived. And so I think that's an important point to make, that this is who we're saying rose from the dead, right? We're not just saying any old Joe rose from the dead. And so again, I think that's why Jesus keeps tipping the boxes for all these extraordinary anomalies.
I'm not getting it.
And
So are you saying it's a combination of things? It's that they claimed this unprecedented claim in that Jewish culture that a crucified Messiah had been raised from the dead, the fact that people truly believed they'd seen that, the fact that it happened to someone who has had this extraordinary influence on culture, human rights, everything else, and that movement now comprises, easily a third of the world's population or whatever it is.
But let me, and this will help you, Bart. This will help your confusion on this. So when it comes to this fourth bedrock fact, there's many lines of arguments, but let me give you one. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. So we know what Jesus in the New Testament, before he died, and as the risen Jesus, I know you wouldn't think that he said these things as the risen Jesus, but we know what he wanted. Okay, we know what, let's say, this apparition, this supernatural coming back from the dead human being wanted. He wanted the gospel to go to all nations. He said, make disciples of all nations. He said, you will begin here in Jerusalem, you'll go to Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And from Jerusalem, the ends of the earth, interesting, I mean, I haven't done the exact coordinates, but maybe Papua New Guinea would be like something like the other side of the world. And interestingly, Papua New Guinea has over 90% of people that profess Christianity. I just find that amazing that it was said by Jesus in the first century on the Mount of Olives that this message will go to all nations. It's made it to the other side of the world, but 195 nations, how many of those have Christians in them? So what you'll call this a happy accident, I presume, but I would say, wow, what Jesus wanted, what the raised Jesus wanted, actually came to fruition. And of course, to have that accomplished, it took dominating the Roman Empire. It took dominating Western civilization. It took all that. Wow. And this looks to me like a raised Jesus, Lord of the world, directing his church. What say you?
This is your view of a historical argument for the resurrection. Is that what you're saying? Is that this is evidence?
I'm saying this is a clear counterfactual. The Christian movement didn't have to survive. It could have not gone to the ends of the earth. It could have stayed in one part of the world the whole 2,000 years, the last 2,000 years.
No, I understand as a Christian that this is very important to you.
But you don't have to be a Christian to believe
I'm just asking if you see this as evidence that Jesus was raised from the dead. Was this the sort of thing that you would publish in a historical journal as an argument that Jesus was resurrected? If it's something else, it's fine. If it's your
I'm saying
theological
it's one of the lines of evidence.
I'm asking you, is this the sort of thing you would publish in a historical journal as an evidence for what happened to Jesus' body?
I would definitely publish it as something that is a line of evidence for the raised Jesus and the fact that he's Lord of the world and still directing his church.
Okay, so here's my view. This is an argument that would be convincing to people who are already convinced. It's not an argument that will carry zero weight with anybody who's not convinced, because it's a theological argument. And I have no problems with theological arguments because they have their place. The mistake is thinking that
it's a historical fact, though. It's not a theological argument. Jesus made this claim in the New Testament.
Okay, let me finish.
Okay.
Finish what you're saying, and then
I'm
you'll let me say something.
Yeah, we will.
I'm saying that the argument that Christianity succeeded is not a historical argument for what happened to Jesus' body. The question of the resurrection is what happened to Jesus' body. Was it brought back to life? Now, I'm assuming you don't think it was brought back to life. You could, it's easy to argue, by the way, that one of the things that happened, and what most people today would say, is that it was a near-death experience, right? He died, and so people saw him, and so that'd be another explanation. You could argue that. You could argue most anything, but the fact that billions of people today are convinced, when you go out on your mission in Jordan and you convince somebody, okay, suppose you convince an entire household, and suppose they can convince 100 people that Jesus was raised from the dead. How does the fact that those 100 people now believe show what happened to Jesus' body?
Okay, I feel like you're missing my argument here, 'cause
I
it's
just
not
asked a question. I
it's
just
not
asked you a
succeeding.
question. I asked you a question.
I would agree with you. That doesn't prove.
Okay. So
That's
if
not what I'm saying.
convincing people doesn't prove it,
Yeah.
then the fact so many people have been convinced does not prove it.
It's not that so many people. It's not necessarily that so many people has been convinced. It's that we know what the raised Jesus desired, and what he desired, we now have 20/20 hindsight, and we can say, look, what he desired has happened. And so let me give you an example. If the writing in Mormons, if Moroni had said, I want the Mormon message to eventually dominate America and America to be completely Mormon, okay? And let's say we're sitting at a table in some future time and all of America was Mormon.
Yes.
It was completely Mormon.
Yes.
I would say, yeah, you know what? That looks like some evidence that Moroni might have had, there may be something to him.
Okay.
So in the same way.
Let's pursue that then.
So
let's pursue
in
it.
the same way, let me finish. In the same way, if Jesus says, my gospel will go to all nations.
Okay.
And now 2,000 years later, it has.
Yeah.
And we could think of 100, thousands of counterfactuals where it didn't have to do that.
Yes.
The Christian movement could have died and
can I-
disappeared.
and one of the things you point out is that there
think
were
that's
other
a
Jewish
very important
messianic movements which did peter out, where when the Messiah got killed, it stopped. But your point is this was the only one in which the leader said it will go to the ends of the earth, and it actually did.
I mean,
and therefore that's some
as
kind
you know,
of...
as you
Who
know,
else
I
said
don't think
their message would go to
I
the ends of
absolutely
the
don't
earth?
think Jesus said that. Of course, it's in the gospel, so we could have that argument too. Yeah.
But whoever said that, just to make the point, whoever said that, it still was said in the context of Christianity being what, thousands of people? So it's still amazing claim and fulfillment.
I'm sorry, this is not a historical argument for the resurrection. You can't claim that the rate of growth of religion is an indication of its truthfulness.
It's not rate of growth. It's fulfilling a specific claim that Jesus made. How do you not see that?
So respond to that specific then.
Jesus
Bart.
never
What do you
made
think?
this claim.
Okay.
Okay, Luke. Then whoever wrote Luke and whoever wrote Acts and whoever wrote Matthew, they made the claim. Did they prove right? Were they
I
proved
think you've
right?
read my books. I don't think that.
Oh, okay. No. I'm saying whoever wrote Matthew, I'm assuming you're anonymous authorship on these books. I'm saying whoever wrote them, they made these claims. According to you, they put them on the lips of Jesus.
the lips of Jesus.
But when they made
As
these
you know
claims,
from my books, that's never what I've said.
Just explain what
Matthew
what your
didn't make
perspective
this up. Matthew's living in a community that's living 40, 50, 60 years after Jesus.
Okay.
There have been storytellers about Jesus all along.
Okay, so he got that. But my point, somebody made this claim. And it ended up on the lips of Jesus. I think Jesus made the claim. But according to you, somebody made the claim. But whoever made the claim in the first century, somehow 2,000 years later, it's been fulfilled.
Can I ask you?
Who is that guy? We got to find him. He's the genius.
Okay, we're going to go to a break.
I just don't think.
After Bart's responded.
I would just like to know if it was to go to the entire world, why hasn't the whole world? I don't think this is a historical argument at all. This is a theological argument, which I'm happy to talk with you if you want to talk theology instead of history. But if that is your theology, that it had to go to the whole world, why, in your theological view, hasn't the whole world converted?
Well, I think many do reject the claims of the gospel, and I think many have not heard the claims of the gospel.
Why? If it was supposed to go to the whole world, why hasn't it gone to the whole world?
Well, that's the thing. It has. That's my point.
No, it hasn't. You just said many people hadn't heard.
Well, I'm saying, yeah. But that's what I'm saying. Based on the evidence of the last 2,000 years, do you think it will ultimately go to all? We're talking about tribes that just haven't heard. I mean, we're talking about people like in South America.
We're
People
talking
in
about
Africa.
millions of people, billions of people haven't heard.
But
well, why hasn't
in faraway
if
tribes
this is
and
proof,
things.
if
But
proof
do
that
you
God's
think-
behind it, why hasn't it happened?
But
You said
based-
Jesus said it would make it happen. Why hasn't it happened?
Well, let's stick with what he said. He said he's going to return, right? So will it happen before he returns? What do you think? Based on the last 2,000 years of
I think
evidence.
the answer is no.
Okay.
Well, look, we're going to take a break there. And we'll be back for the final thrilling part of this debate on whether Jesus of Nazareth rose from the dead. My guests are Bart Ehrman and Justin Bass. We'll be back in just a moment.
Now's the exciting part when we arm wrestle.
Enjoying the conversation? Tell us who persuaded you in our survey. Plus, register now and you'll receive the ebook of Bart Ehrman debating Peter Williams on the story of Jesus. Welcome back to The Big Conversation, final part of today's discussion between Bart Ehrman and Justin Bass. Did Jesus of Nazareth rise from the dead? It's been an exciting debate between you two. I haven't sat in the middle of quite such a pugnacious interaction in a little while.
Excited.
It's been fun. It's been fun. Look, final segment. So why don't we go to one more of your particular lines of evidence from this fourth fact about the rise of Christianity, and why? Give us another one, and let's do another few minutes with Bart on this.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I happen to be writing a book on this one. This is my next book, so I'm interested to hear what Bart thinks about it. So this one really has to do with the dreams and visions of Jesus, and really my passion for this came as a result of my time in Jordan. So I got to actually meet a number of Muslims who have had dreams of this. Many times they call him man in white. You know, he's full of light, and he quotes scripture, and you know, it's a dream or a vision, and then they ultimately convert to Christianity. Usually they're led to a church or something. And this is happening, you know, from Muslims in Syria, from Iraq, from Jordan, from Lebanon, you know, all over the Middle East. This is kind of a phenomenon. If you talk to missionaries, it's amazing. They're even putting up signs that say, if you've seen the man in white, call this number. So it's happening so often that Muslims are responding to that. And so it's an interesting thing. But as I've gotten into the book, what I'm fascinated with throughout church history is I actually have examples from every century for the last 2,000 years of people who have believed that Jesus appeared to them, and I do think these are separate, these are distinct from the resurrection appearances, which I think ended with Paul, but I think these are the continuation, just as we see in the book of Acts. Jesus still continued to appear to Paul, like in Corinth, and encourage him and things like that. These kind of visions are happening, whether dreams or visions, and they're happening to people all over the world, almost every nation for the last 2,000 years. And so to me, again, this is another line of evidence that Jesus rose from the dead and is still appearing to people. It goes back to what he desires. Jesus desires to seek and to save the lost. And so I think Jesus is seeking and saving now, because even unbelievers are having these visions.
I'm going to anticipate what Bart is going to say, but Bart, you can correct me. But doesn't this happen in other religions? Why this isn't exclusive to Christianity? People claim they've had all kinds of visions in other religions. Doesn't prove that the religion is true necessarily.
Yeah, I would say this is unique to Christianity. And again, so I hate bringing back Moroni. I think we've talked about Moroni more in this discussion than any time Moroni's ever been talked about outside of Utah. But yeah, the fact that Jesus is appearing all over the world, almost every nation for the last 2,000 years, to Hindus, to Buddhists, to Muslims, to Jews, and they're converting. I don't know of any other faith that could make such a claim. So this is I think, a unique phenomenon. There's even I think Bart's aware of this because he referenced Philip Weeby's book, Visions of Jesus, which I'm had enjoyed reading in preparation for my book, and he talks about how there's even a separate study in the psychological understanding of the paranormal and of these type of things called Christic visions, because they're so common and there's so many. This is happening so often. And so that's what I would say is it's really truly a unique phenomenon with, again, the person of Jesus. So this is just another line of evidence to add to all these others that we've been talking about that I think suggests this Jesus rose from the dead.
Okay. Bart.
Well, I don't really have anything to say about it. I mean,
I'm pretty sure you do, Bart.
Oh no, I really don't. I mean, because I don't think it's any evidence of anything. I mean, people have dreams about all sorts of things. It doesn't mean the thing is real. I mean, so I'm sorry, I've never thought about it, studied it. I read this book, and it was a good book. It was very weird, very strange. I don't believe it really happened. As you know, the film disappeared.
I don't. But he interviewed. Just so you know, he's talking about a film that they believe they saw Jesus. I don't buy that either.
Okay.
But there was 32 individuals he interviewed that gave people
No,
from
yeah,
Canada,
that's quite
people
remarkable.
from Australia, people from America that gave powerful. I was convinced that
But
they
the
have
fact
seen
people
the risen
have
Jesus.
dreams and visions of, something like
Yeah,
Christ.
well, it's not
does
true that
for
it's
you.
not true that it only happens in Christianity, of course.
Okay,
Yeah.
what other
Well, it's very
places
famous
do we
in the
see it?
ancient world. I mean, people in one of the great healing gods of the Greeks was Asclepius, and the way the healing rituals worked is that there was a shrine of Asclepius. He was a divine being, a Greek divine being who could heal people, and people who had a problem. They had breast cancer, or they had a maimed limb, or they had cancer. They had whatever they had. They were blind. They'd go to an Asclepium. It was called Asclepion, and it would they would. The way it worked is you would go to sleep in there, and you'd spend and Asclepius would come to the person, and heal them. And we have abundant testimony, hundreds of testimonies that this worked. And we actually have a number of these Asclepia that have been dug up by archaeologists that they're actually pretty interesting because they would make representations of the body part that got healed. And so you'd have their walls covered with breasts and penises and arms and eyes and ears, depending on what. And so it was all based on a dream cult. And Asclepius isn't the only one. We have all sorts of cults involving Zeus, for example. And so throughout history, of course, there have been lots of cults that claim that they're, the person is being dreamed of and healing them.
That is fascinating. History. I've learned a lot about Asclepius, but I just have to ask you, Bart, who has Asclepius appeared to lately?
Just last night, I had a really interesting dream, and it proves that Asclepius was raised from the dead because I dreamed about it.
Let me ask you this: if people from all over the world started thinking that Asclepius was appearing to them, or Apollonius of Tyana, or Moroni, or any of them, wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't you go, wow, there may be something?
Yeah, that would be
to
something.
This.
Yeah, that would be something.
But it's happening with Jesus.
I don't think so.
No, it's a fact that it's happening.
No, it's not.
It's just whether or not he's actually appearing to them.
There are 8 billion. There are 8 billion people in the world. The people who've never heard of Jesus do not have dreams of him.
No, one of the examples in my book is Samuel Morris, a guy from Libya, and he heard the voice of Jesus. He went to Taylor. I don't know if you heard of Taylor University. They have a statue for him. They dedicated a whole hall for him. He had never heard of Jesus. He heard the voice of Jesus. He survived this tribal attack. It's an amazing story. I mean, again,
it's amazing. Great.
Like Pincus Lapide, you should look into these. These are powerful.
Yeah.
But there definitely are people who have never heard of Jesus, and they have these visions. They have these dreams. And
why do you think it doesn't? So again, I don't think this is a historical argument, but just out of curiosity, why do you think it's taken so long? And why don't you think Jesus just appears to everybody?
Well, because I agree with Blaise Pascal. He said, God isn't interested, I'm paraphrasing, but he said, God isn't interested in just convincing the intellect. He wants to incline the will.
Yeah, but
so I think he wants to humble us. So I think he wants people to not just be convinced. He could easily do that. He could do something wild in the sky and convince all of us.
But if he could break the laws of physics, and
he could do that at any point. But I think the God of the Bible, what I think in Jesus, they want us to humble ourselves.
Okay.
They want us. Jesus wants us to come to him and seek him with all our heart, and he'll respond.
So why does he show up to some people then? Why does he show up to some people, not others?
I don't, I can't say exactly why Jesus appears to this person or not, but I would say maybe it's because that person has more open heart and they're responding in some way, kind of like Cornelius in Acts. He's seeking, the true God, and what happens?
So the fact that
an angel appears to Peter, and Peter brings the gospel to Cornelius.
So people with an open heart have dreams of Jesus, and then they convert, and people don't. And so, okay. That's fine. If that's your theological view, that's fine. It's a religious point of view.
I didn't say I know for sure, but I'm just saying it's likely that it would. You know very well from the Bible that depending on someone's response in their heart, if they're seeking or if they're hardening their heart, a lot of times that depends on their interaction and how God is.
That's fine. I mean, it's a religious view, and it's fine. It's not the sort of view that a historian would use to argue for something that happened in the past.
Where I think you are trying to tie it to something historical, Justin, is that for you, it seems to be that this happens in today's world, let's say, for Christianity. People from other worldviews aren't having visions of the Prophet Muhammad here in the UK. They're not having visions of.
I don't know if that's true.
Well, I'll say it this way: people of their own religions, they do have visions. But across the way, that doesn't happen. And it's amazing. I mean, you can even go to Google and search. I've done it in YouTube.
Oh, well, Google's the one I trust, especially the internet. I think, especially if you have a Wikipedia page, I'm there.
But you can't find like Christians are not having visions of Muhammad and Krishna and Buddha.
Okay.
Buddhists are not having visions of Krishna.
But you're saying Muslims are having visions of
but
Jesus.
Muslims are, and here's the amazing thing: Muslims aren't having visions of Joseph Smith, and then saying, "Oh, Mormonism's true." That's never happened.
I don't know if it's true or not, and I think that's incredible. I think it's I think it's literally incredible, but I think it's incredible.
I'm going to send my book. You're going to endorse this book.
No, I am not going to endorse it. I will, yeah. If you promise to let me put my own blurb on the back, I will definitely write an endorsement.
Maybe
I mean, obviously, but you feel...
I believe in freedom of speech, but not on my books.
I mean, you feel that where Justin takes these arguments strays beyond the realm of history, obviously. You think that... But in any case, it strikes me that even when you go back to the things where you were happy to agree on some of those bedrock facts, the death of Jesus, the fact that there was a claim, the fact that people claimed that they had the appearances, and so on. Even so, it doesn't sound to me like that could ever amount to enough to explain for a resurrection to be explanation, because at the end of the day, people don't rise from the dead. That's what you're saying.
No,
that seems to be what you're saying. Because you're saying,
I know it sounds like that's what I'm saying.
You can't break the law of physics. People don't rise from the dead.
No, it's not quite what I'm saying.
Okay. Go on then.
You've got he's given 5 claims so far, right? The crucifixion, the unparalleled claim, as you're calling it, the appearances, the triumph of Christianity over the earth, and now dreams. Okay, so of those 5, I would say one of them could be considered historical evidence for the resurrection. I'm not saying
which one, the appearances.
Yeah, okay. Because crucifixion obviously isn't a proof of a resurrection, right?
Well, you have to be dead
proof
to
he died.
To be resurrected.
But that's not proof of a resurrection. It's just proof of a death.
Yeah, sure.
Right. So I mean, it's not proof of resurrection, and unprecedented claims. I don't think that's an argument, because the claim was not, oh, the Messiah has been raised from the dead. The claim was, we have seen Jesus. And that claim is not unprecedented. We have lots and lots, thousands, millions of people who claim to see someone who's dead, who's alive now. So that's not evidence. The appearances is evidence.
But what does evidence? But okay. But how many appearances would you need before you change? Because didn't you say?
Just let me get there.
Okay.
So the triumph is not evidence, and the dreams aren't evidence. They're not historical evidence. You might confirm you in your religious belief. So it's really the appearances. And so the question is, what kind of appearances would it take to convince somebody? And so the way I usually put it is this. So in terms of the laws of physics, if you take a cup of coffee, or in this country, tea, and you pour some cream in it and you stir it up, because of the second law of thermodynamics, the cream disperses throughout the coffee or tea. And no matter how much you stir it, you can't put the cream back. Right? It's the law of thermodynamics. It's not a theory. It's not a hypothesis. It's the law of thermodynamics. That's what happens, because entropy always increases in a closed system. Okay, so that's a law, and which means it is, to our knowledge, it has never been violated. Now, suppose that there's somebody who says that in 1920, suppose you have 5 people, suppose you have 10 people who say in 1920, they saw a guy put cream in his coffee, and he stirred it till it dispersed, and he kept stirring, and then the cream came to the top just like that. How many historians would trust those 10 people? None. And in fact, it's not just, I mean, I wouldn't believe them. They said they saw it. Okay, they said they saw it. People say they see things that are not true. And so if you've got something like that has never happened, you need more than a few people saying they saw it.
Okay.
That's my view.
Final thoughts, and we'll close this up.
If I can ask just one more question, I was going to throw out the 500. We didn't get to talk about the 500. You make an offhand comment that I thought was interesting. I think it's in How Jesus Became God. You said there's a certain force in the argument, and so I was just curious if the 500, claim, if that's historical, if there were 500 people that Paul maybe knew some of them, would you consider that some at least forceful?
I'd consider it to be the same level of evidence as the 1,000 people who saw the Mother Mary on a cliff. which happens, is completely well documented, that Mary appeared to over 500 people on numerous occasions. And so I think you have to take it into account, figure out, well, what really probably happened. But I don't know any historian who's a non-Catholic who would say, yeah, therefore Mary genuinely appeared. They'd say, well, they saw something.
We're running out of time, so we'll have final thoughts. So go ahead, Justin.
I would just say, this has been great, and thank you, Bart, again. But I would just say, follow the evidence where it leads. And I think if you look at the appearances, if you look at what has transpired over the last 2,000 years, and especially, I think these points that what Jesus wanted to happen has happened. The fact that Jesus is still appearing to people in dreams and visions all over the world. I think all this points. Where there's a lot of smoke, there's a fire. And I think, when you look at all the things that have happened around the world, I think we see all the smoke. It must go back to a fire. I think if Bart's correct, it just smoke all the way down. And I don't think so. I think there was a fire.
Final thought, Bart?
Yeah, I think that the big issue in Christian apologetics is that apologists are doing theology, claiming to do history. And I have no trouble with people doing theology. I have no trouble with people believing Jesus was raised from the dead. History is actually two things, and I think apologists tend to get it confused, and I think that's what's going on here. The two things are, history in one sense is anything that happened in the past. The other sense that history, the term of the way historians use history, is what you can establish as having happened in the past, where you have evidence. And for that, you need historical arguments. You can't have religious arguments. You have to have historical arguments. Just like you can't have mathematical arguments to prove philosophy, or you can't have philosophical arguments. There are different realms of discourse, and theology and history are different realms of discourse. If you pretend you're doing history when in fact you're doing theology, I just don't think it's right. And you're trying to convince people because they don't know, and they sound, well, that sounds like it's history. No, it is not history. To claim that that something is historical requires a critical evaluation of all the sources and all the information, and to establish levels of probability. It isn't simply to tell people what they want to hear and say, here's my evidence for it.
Right. Well, you can go and look for yourself in the books that have been mentioned already. Justin's book is The Bedrock of Christianity, The Unalterable Facts About Jesus' Death and Resurrection. There are many books published by Bart Ehrman as well, where he deals with these issues as well. But it's been a really thrilling discussion to be part of today. Thank you,
Really
Bart.
enjoyed it.
Me too.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
And good to see you. Hope we can do this again sometime. Thank you for watching. Want more from today's conversation? Register now and you'll receive the ebook of Bart Ehrman debating Peter Williams on the story of Jesus. And tell us who persuaded you in our survey with today's show.